Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues. Welcome to this online event. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Antonino Salmeri. I'm the director of the Lunar Policy Platform. And together with me, there is my colleague, Samuel Jardine, who is policy specialist at LPP. Please make yourself comfortable. Welcome to this online event on information sharing for peaceful, safe, and sustainable lunar activities, where we will present the Lunar Information Sharing 101. I'm going to drop here our agenda. We're going to give a few minutes for everybody to join online. If you're coming from a previous meeting, take a few moments to breathe, get yourself water, coffee, stretch your legs. We'll begin in just a few minutes. So at 05, whatever time is it for you, we will begin with the event. In the meantime, if you have any questions, if you have anything needed, feel free to drop a message to Sam in the chat. I will be giving some housekeeping rules as we wait for the official beginning of the event in a couple of minutes. As you know, the goal of the event is to present the Lunar Information Sharing 101, and then to have a discussion in case there is any question or comments from the audience. So your participation is highly encouraged, and we certainly appreciate you having at this event. If you want to join the discussion, please drop a message in the chat. You can do so in the public chat, or you could mention directly and send a message directly to Sam, and then that will allow you to send your question more privately. You can also use email if you prefer, of course. And then during the discussion, we will be inviting more comments. You're most welcome to keep your video on. We certainly encourage that. We'd like to keep an environment where we could see each other. This is a friendly, relaxed event, but please keep your microphone off whenever you're not given the floor, just to keep some good housekeeping rules of our online event so that we can go on with the proper sound. So once more, we'll begin in a few minutes. Make yourself comfortable. Let us know if you have any technical difficulties. I hope everybody at this point can see the slide with the agenda, and we will be beginning very soon. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I see also Rachel turning on her video. Thank you for joining us, Rachel, today. Open Lunar, one of our closest partners and founder of the development of Lunar Information Sharing 101. So without you, certainly would not be here today. So thank you so much for everything you've done and for being with us.
Looking forward to the presentation today.
Thanks a lot. And I see many other colleagues joining us from different parts of the world, where it's also very early. So I appreciate our colleagues calling in from the United States, Canada. We know it's not the most ideal time, but when we're trying to do global events, it's probably like 9 or 10 p.m. in Japan already. So we're trying to strike a balance for everyone to be able to join. This event will be recorded. If you have any objection to that, please do let us know in private, and we'll make sure to avoid any reference to you. The recording will be circulated with the registered participants, and hopefully will be also uploaded on the web YouTube channel of LPP. So to ensure the widest possible distribution of the event. So one more minute, and then we will be shortly beginning. Welcome to everybody who's joining us right now. We're just getting started with the event. Only one more minute, and then we'll begin. Please make yourself comfortable as we start. Again, thank you all for joining us from so many different parts of the world. We certainly appreciate you being with us today. And as mentioned, feel free to have your camera on if you want. We'll be happy to see some familiar faces. If you can't, no worries. It's a busy day. Hello, Marietta. Also, thank you for joining us. Our partners at the Royal Astronomical Society, GUYU, Beijing Institute of Technology. Thank you so much. Right now, we have literally all corners of the world. What time is it in China, GUYU, before we begin?
Hi, good evening. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon as well.
Good evening indeed. Hope it's not too late for you. Thank you for joining us.
Not really. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's 05 and we don't want to take any more of your time. So we will begin straight with the event. More people will probably continue to join in. As I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Antonino Salmeri. I'm the director of the Lunar Policy Platform. Most of you know me. I know most of you. Thank you so much for being with us today. With me, I have my colleague, Samuel Jardine, who is policy specialist at LPP, and we're joined by a number of friends and partners, including, as I mentioned before, our dear colleagues at Open Lunar Foundation, who has been supporting the development of the Lunar Information Sharing one-on-one. During this event, we're going to present the final version of the LIS one-on-one, focusing on some of the highlights of the document, which is now available online for anybody to download, and we'll be sharing a link soon. And then we're going to go into a discussion with all of you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we're going to start going through them in the second part of this event. And then we're going to have a quick address to understand what's going to happen next in terms of the development of the document. And let's kick it up. So like I mentioned before, presentation will be divided in 3 parts. Most of you are familiar already with LPP, but for those of you who are not, and for those who will be watching the recording, we'll be giving a just quick introduction to LPP. For those of you who know already, it's going to be a status update, if you wish. Then we're going to go and discuss the highlights of the Lunar Information Sharing one-on-one, and then we're going to talk about next steps and opportunities for engagements and partnerships. So let's begin with a quick introduction to Lunar Policy Platform. The vision of LPP is, in a way, simple but ambitious. We want to enable a peaceful, prosperous, and cooperative future on the moon through law and policy, and specifically through lunar policy. And to do that, to achieve this vision, our mission is to create a conducive policy environment for peaceful, safe, and sustainable lunar activities. What that does really mean is that we are aiming to put the conditions so that activities on the moon can be conducted peacefully, safe, and sustainably through policies, standards, identification of priorities, everything that we need to work together in a very difficult but also incredibly rewarding environment. LPP pursues its mission through 2 entities. We have our main entity, the Lunar Policy Platform, which is a non-profit organization, and it's the entity that is developing the policies that we've been discussing today and that LPP has developed so far. We produce regularly reports, snapshots, policies, and standards. You will hear about some examples of that soon enough. And then we also have a consulting branch that is dedicated to supporting specific stakeholders. So if you don't have anything to say, or if you're not interested in general policy development, but you do have a specific question about a lunar mission, or you have a query about the applicability of the Outer Space Treaty to space resource activities, then that's what LPP is also there to help educate and provide expert training and advice to stakeholders that need it specifically. The 2 entities, anyway, work together to fulfill LPP's mission and vision. Both entities also share 5 distinctive features that are one of the trademarks, let's say, of LPP. I'll go through them very briefly. One of them is that we are an expert-based organization. So LPP is not a voluntary association. We employ professionals that dedicate their working time to the development of lunar policy. We believe that it's necessary because we partner already with a number of voluntary associations and organizations which have been doing amazing foundational work for the development of lunar policy. But the complexity of the issues at hand and, frankly, also what is at stake on the moon, we believe it requires dedicated expertise and working time from professionals that have been trained for that. Similarly, we're an organization that is open and neutral. We don't have any political or policy agenda of our own. In fact, the goal of LPP is to listen to all stakeholders, to find different viewpoints, and then to hopefully identify common ground, and to also acknowledge the divergency that exists between different viewpoints. And we do that in a completely neutral fashion. To do that, we're also a global network. Today, I think it's the best representation of that. We're joined by stakeholders from all over the world. We have partners spanning across literally all continents, and we are extremely proud and thankful for that. And we're also an organization that works with any stakeholder, from governments to policymakers, space agencies, of course, lunar companies and operators, science, academia, research centers, and obviously also individual experts. Even though we have this amazing expertise in our hands, we're not a speculative organization. We're not a think tank. Our goal is to focus on practical issues and to resolve practical issues that are standing in the way between us and a prosperous future on the moon, specifically focusing on peace, safety, and sustainability. That is also because we have amazing colleagues in academia that already conduct the theoretical research that we need to then address practical problems. So the reason why LPPs exist is exactly to focus very tailored and specifically focused questions. At the same time, we adopt an holistic approach. There is no issue on the moon that can be solved on its own or that it's completely independent from the others. Everything is interrelated, especially because the environment of the moon is not particularly big, and everything that happens on one side of the moon can have an influence on what's happening on the other side. And so to enable something like space resource activities, for example, we need landing capabilities, we need energy production, we need storage facilities, there is need for transportation. And so everything needs to be considered in an interdependent fashion. And that's one of the other trademarks that we have at LPP. So our value proposition, what we bring as added value to the discussion into the policy world is, first of all, as I mentioned before, LPP is one of the few actors, if not the only actor, that talks to all stakeholders. We have annual consultations with 45 and plus different organizations from all over the world, and we are the only ones that try and provide common ground. So we look at all these perspectives, and then we produce concrete action report that will identify foundations so that then policymakers, governments, but also companies can take their own informed decisions as to what they want to do on the moon. We also have the privilege of being a flexible organization because we're not a policy-making body, and therefore our tools are adaptive. Everything that we do at LPP is flexible, and it's meant to support adaptive governance, which means that we can continue to evolve these tools as time goes by and as we learn and evolve our lunar activities. And then finally, we want to use all this knowledge to support stakeholders, especially those stakeholders in emerging nations that don't have the capabilities to understand the complexities of lunar policies on their own, but still should be heard and still should have a way to participate. And so we try to bridge that gap and provide individual tailored advice to all the stakeholders that need it. Our areas of work, as you will see also towards the end of the presentation, revolve around three pillars. We support policy development. This is, for example, what we're doing today, policy development on lunar information sharing. As of next year, as we start to develop policies, we'll also look at implementation of these policies. And then what we've been doing from the very first day of LPP, we also support with the education of stakeholders and awareness raising in lunar policy. Very briefly, our work so far, most of you are familiar with it. In 2023, we released the Lunar Policy Priorities Report, 10 priority areas to be addressed for safe and sustainable lunar development, including a proposal for a lunar policy decalogue. This is directly foundational to the work that we're doing today because information sharing is at the very high top of the list of the priorities that we identified. And then last year, we did the 2024 snapshot, which is a unique type of document that provides you, again, a snapshot of what are the trends that have shaped the year in lunar policy and what are the implications in the future. And to give you an example, in 2024, we've been the first organization to identify the development of nuclear reactors as a key topic that will shape policy discussions in 2025. And just a few weeks ago, you've probably seen that making major headlines and becoming a topic of conversation in many different areas. After the announcement from the acting administrator of NASA. So this is the type of work that we do, and this is the work that we're doing. Today, we're going to talk about information sharing. We're also working on a guide to lunar science and ethics that will be released in about a month. So please stay tuned, and we're pleased to partner on that document with COSPAR and IAU. And all of this work has been done with the incredible support of the Open Lunar Foundation, which has been together with us from day one and has been generously supporting the development of these two documents in 2025. And we'll hopefully continue to work together in 2026. I've said enough about LPP, but I hope this status update was useful. And if you didn't know about us, I hope this will give you an understanding and context for the type of work that I'm going to present today. So let's talk about the Lunar Information Sharing 101. The document is essentially meaning to be a reference guide on lunar information sharing. It outlines the core elements on information sharing. Why do we want to share information? What do you need to share if you want to achieve a certain purpose? How do you share information? Where do you share it? And most importantly, sometimes how and when. The document aims to also provide some principles and practices to foster the conduct of information sharing, which is a topic that I think everybody agrees has become a crucial priority, but sometimes there is a need for guidance and streamlined approaches. And that's exactly what the Lunar Information Sharing 101 aims to do. As most of you know, because you have participated to this process, and thank you for that, the Lunar Information Sharing 101 is based on a total of 8 to 9 months of development, 3 months for consultation, and 5 months for review. We did 3 iterations of the document, every time incorporating different feedback, and thanks again to all of you who have provided that. And in total, we have involved over 45 stakeholders from all over the world, most of them governments and space agencies, because those are the ones that have the most interest in information sharing, but also companies, experts, and civil society organizations. So in this presentation, we're going to go through the 5 key elements that I mentioned before. Why share information, what to share, where to share it, how, and when. And then we're going to look at some principles. I, of course, will leave you to take a look at the document for any details, but of course, we're also looking forward to any question that you may have. So let's begin with the why. Why sharing information? We've been asking this question to stakeholders because this is one area where it's easy to misunderstand each other. Why are we sharing information? And as a result of the consultation, we have identified 4 large categories, which you see listed here in the order of priority. And I'm always hesitant to do that because it might seem that the last one is not important or is less important. This is not a priority in the sense of like what is more worth to do. It's more what stakeholders feel it's urgent to do. And so again, this is not LPP's views. This is what came out of the consultations. We've been asking, what do you feel is the most urgent purpose for information sharing? And safety and situational awareness came first in every single consultation that we had. The reason is simple to identify. The moon is a very difficult, complex, challenging environment. If we are not aware of what the others are doing on the moon, which does not mean that we need to know everything that they're doing. It means we need to know a few details that we're going to go look in a moment. Then it's not possible to operate safely. And without safety, there is no mission assurance, and therefore there is no lunar development. Second to that, in terms of urgency, again, is peace and transparency. Knowing what the others are going to do on the moon is not just a question of operational safety, it's a question of confidence building and trust building. We all know that the moon is a sensitive, certainly very relevant environment for a number of reasons, for cultural and ethical reasons, for scientific reasons, for commercial reasons, for geopolitical reasons. So being transparent about the goals and the activities that will be conducted on the moon will avoid misunderstandings and will hopefully prevent any conflict and escalations that could happen when we don't know what the others are doing. That puts everybody in a nervous state, and it does not create an environment that is conducive to cooperation and collaboration. And cooperation is exactly the third purpose of lunar information sharing. And this was especially underlined by the commercial companies we have identified. Because if you don't know who the actors will be on the moon, then you don't have any customers. And so it is actually in the interest of business development to share certain information about what you want to do, what do you want to offer, and what the others may need from you. So cooperation and collaboration are a key aspect that are enabled by information sharing for commercial, but also for governmental cooperation. And then sustainability, of course. If we do want to make the best use of the moon and we want to avoid duplication, we should work together. We should find synergies. And again, if we don't know what's going to go on, then we cannot do it. And last but certainly not least, benefit sharing and capacity building. By sharing information and to a certain extent data, we help all the stakeholders that do not have the capabilities to participate in lunar activities to benefit from them on the one hand, but also on the other hand, to close the gap, to build the capacity they need to participate in lunar activities in the future. So if those are the 4 purposes of lunar information sharing, what to share depends on the purpose that we're trying to achieve. And especially it depends on how stringent you are with your purpose. So obviously information required for safety is perhaps the most detailed one, or the one that requires the highest amount of information. Because again, if we want to make sure that there is no overlap, that there is no dust ejected on someone else's rover or lander, we need to know when the activity is going to take place, where the activities is going to take place, what are the systems involved, and what are the hazards that are caused by the activities. Interestingly enough, most of the actors that were interviewed mentioned that the presence of humans is a key safety element that needs to be told well in advance, because humans require extra safety measures. And so it's one thing to interfere with a robotic mission. Another thing is to create a potential issue to a human mission. So all of this don't need to be shared in detail anyways, right? The question is knowing the overall high level details of all of it, and then more information can be provided on a direct basis. That's why sharing points of contacts, you see that as number one, is perhaps one of the key elements. Who is going to conduct the activity and where can they be found? There is a lot that we're learning from SSA on the orbital environment around this, because if we want to avoid a collision, we first and foremost need to know who to contact and how. And that is a key aspect that we're going to need for lunar safety. If we look at lunar transparency, the information required is the same as lunar safety. The first 5 elements overlap across all the board practically. However, like I mentioned before, the level of detail is different. If we want to avoid interference, we need to know a little bit more what are the specification of a system, what type of actual dust, for example, ejection could create. But if we just want to know and be assured that the mission is in compliance with the Aerospace Treaty, that is not pursuing anything that is, for example, forbidden because it's a military operation, then that level of detail is not required. And so there is a graduation of the information sharing depending on the purpose, even though it may look the same category of information, for example, duration or location. Additional information may be useful for a certain purpose and not required for another. And like I said before, anything can be shared at an enabling level so that actors that may be affected can reach out and have a more in-depth one-to-one conversation whenever needed. When we look at information required for sustainability and cooperation, those are a bit, again, similar in nature because the first 5 overlap across the board. However, again, the outlook is completely different because here we're not trying to avoid a collision. We're not trying to prevent a potential accident. We are trying to understand gaps. We're trying to understand where my activity can fit in your plans so that we can help each other. And so in that sense, again, the same categories, but different graduation of information. And then benefit sharing and capacity building is perhaps the one that is a little bit more different because most of the valuable information that we can get for capacity building happens after the activity, not before. Most of the information we want to know for safety, for peace, for sustainability, we need to know before. This is what the stakeholders said, and we're going to go into the timeline in a moment. But for benefit sharing and capacity building, we want to know lesson learned. We want to know scientific results. We want to know certain details that are best shared after the activity has concluded. So here there is a shift in timeline. And so then again, the same categories of information will have a different flavor because they're shared after the activity has been conducted. So in a way that it's also confirmed, whereas previously it's all tentative in a way until the mission has actually succeeded. Let's go for a moment into where do we share information, especially where do we share information at the present time. We have tried to make sense of all the different channels that exist so far, and we have tried to do that by dividing per topic. And so today, especially government actors, if they want to share information about an activity, the streamlining that came up out of the consultations is to make use of Article 11 of the Aerospace Treaty, and particularly feed information into the index of space activities that is maintained by the UN Office for Aerospace Affairs under Article 11 of the Aerospace Treaty. And there is work going on within the legal subcommittee of COPUS to turn that index, which currently is a list of PDF, into an actual repository. And we're going to go into that in a second. Whenever we are sharing information about objects, of course, the registry of space objects under the registration convention is the primary source for looking for that information and also for feeding information. And then at the moment, website of lunar operators are the place to find information about missions. Then again, it's important to see this information displayed in a clear manner. And so that's where the how becomes critical. The how sharing information helps finding that information easily. It helps also organizing that information in a better way and to display it, as we will say it in a second. So this slide that you're seeing here is the result of almost 5 years of work that started in 2020 with the Article 11 project, together with dear colleague, Professor Mark Sandel from Cleveland State University. And the idea is to develop a template that would help and streamline information sharing by any actor, and especially actors making use of Article 11 of the Outer Space Treaty. This template here is the result of that initial work on the Article 11, the progress of conversation on the development of a template that is being happening within the legal subcommittee of COPUS, and the consultation that LPP has been doing specifically focused on lunar information sharing. So you will see here the same elements that we saw in the previous slides on what to share, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way until 11, which is not a coincidence. And then they are displayed here with a very brief description that is just indicative to help provide guidance. Now, our hope is that this template, which is downloadable as a separate annex to the Lunar Information Sharing 1-on-1, will be used in practice by stakeholders. The reason why we hope so is that if we all share information through the same fashion, then information becomes more easily comparable. We can put together two templates and immediately understand if there is an overlap, because we're going to go immediately look at section 4 and 5 on location and duration. So using the same format will make a big difference into facilitating the understanding and processing of the information. This could be done individually by the stakeholders, but it could also be done by organizations that are dedicated to hosting the information and displaying it in a way that makes sense. And that's where it's not just a question of how do we share information, but also of how do we organize the information. And we've been asking this question during the consultation. Where do you think information about lunar activities should be stored? And after the consultations, we came up with a two-platform solution. There is certain information, especially for peace, transparency, capacity building, benefit sharing, that needs to be publicly available for the benefit of all actors. Now, that information belongs naturally to the United Nations. And like I said, there is already a place to share that information through Article 11. So a lunar registry that could be an evolution or a subsection of the current index or future repository of Article 11 of the Outer Space Treaty could host information provided by states through official government channels for peace and benefit sharing. However, that is not enough. We mentioned before that safety and sustainability are also key reasons why we share information. And a UN database is not exactly a tool that can be adapted very quickly or that can host a lot of technical, operational information. So there is a need for a complement database that would host information provided primarily by operators, but also governments, that will be not necessarily open to the public in all its levels, will be accessible primarily to states and operators contributing to it. And it will be maintained by a dedicated, neutral technical entity that would be developed specifically for that purpose. And our colleagues at Open Lunar are working on exactly this mission for the project called Lunar Ledger. And so if you're interested in knowing more about how Lunar database could work, I certainly would encourage you to reach out to Rachel and Sam, who's also wearing a double hat in this case, supporting stakeholder engagement with the Lunar Ledger. But whoever develops it, there is clearly a need for a Lunar database that complements a lunar registry at the UN level. And then last but not least, when do we share information? When do we share becomes relevant because, again, time is of the essence for safety. If we want to ensure that there is no accident, we need to know the information when we can still make a change into a mission, if a change is required. Knowing that information when it's too late, it's as the information does not exist at all. So again, based on the interviews that we have done, we came up with 3 kind of milestones or checkpoints before a mission. 1 year before, 6 months before, 1 month before. And the reason why we continue to progress is that information becomes more consolidated as we get closer to the mission. And there is certain information that actors may prefer to disclose only when they are sure or only when it's a later stage of the mission. So the idea is to increment and update the information shared, but to start at least 1 year prior, at least with the basics. Who are you? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? And where? And then the next can be updated later on. Conversely, as we mentioned before, for capacity building and sustainability, sharing information is most relevant after the mission because we want to know how the mission went. Sharing lessons learned, sharing results, and eventually scientific findings, those are all key milestones and they all take time. It's common to have an embargo on scientific findings. Whenever there is a scientific mission, the scientists who have been funding or supporting the mission, they get priority. And normally 1 or 2 years later, that is then released with the public. And so we are trying to follow the same approach here. None of this is set in stone, none of this is binding, but we hope, again, it can help stakeholders approaching this in a more streamlined, organized manner. And then we can change these dates, like I mentioned before, in an adaptive fashion whenever we have some practice to work with. I want to close this part by looking at guiding principles very quickly. What have we learned from the analysis on the why, the what, the where, the how, and the when of information sharing? We've learned, number one, that information needs to be accurate. And again, this is not to impose an obligation on anybody, but if the information that is shared is not reliable because it's not precise or it's because it's intentionally not correct, then the information is not useful for any purpose. So we need to do our best to provide as accurate as possible, with a caveat that nothing can be perfect on the moon. We know that, but we need to at least attempt for accuracy. As I mentioned before, information needs to be shared timely. Information shared too late is as information has never been shared. Information needs to be clear. If the information is not understandable, if the information is not displayed and shared in a way that it's fit for the purpose, understandable by stakeholders, then it's as the information is not there at all. And then last but certainly not least, information needs to be shared in good faith. Obviously, every actor has a certain degree of self-interest in sharing information, which is absolutely normal. However, sharing information needs to be done for one of these four main purposes that serve the general community, and done in good faith, because we participate to a system that will be reciprocated, but should not be done only because it will be reciprocated, or only because we're aiming to get an advantage out of it. Very quickly, I want to go through next steps and opportunities for engagement before we open it up for a quick discussion. So next steps for us is distributing the document, and that's what we started to do today. And again, thanks to all of you for being with us at this launch event. We're going to do that throughout the next couple of months, but we will focus specifically on August and September. We will be at the IEC presenting this event, and so we hope to interact and engage with you as we do that. And if you like the document, please help us with it. Then we're going to plan the implementation of the document between October and December. And in 2026, as I mentioned before, next to our policy development activities, which will continue on a topic that we will announce soon, hopefully at the IEC, we will then start with the implementation of the document. Very quickly, how can you participate in each of these steps? Distribution will be done in various channels. Document is available on the LPP website. I think Sam will put a link in the chat fairly soon. There is also a link in this presentation. We're going to email it to all the actors that have been participated in the process and are interested, and we're going to be sharing it into one-on-one meetings as well. So if you're meeting with us, probably you will receive a copy of the LIS 101 at some point. We're going to also bring the document with us in a paper format at events that we're going to go. Next one will be the Outer Space Security Conference that I will attend in Geneva in just a couple of weeks. Then, of course, the IEC in Sydney, and many more events across the calendar. And then, of course, we will present the document and bring it with us at the UN. As you know, there's going to be a commercial lunar conference organized by UNUSA this November, and we're going to be there and bring the document with us. And then, of course, throughout the 2026 cycle of Opus. Again, if you like the document, feel free to distribute it within your network. That would certainly be widely appreciated. Then what's next for it? Once we have the Lunar Information Sharing 101, what can we do to then concretely help the sharing of information? This is where the implementation bits come. Our ideas, and we're open to feedback and your suggestion, is to do some case studies specifically focused on operational scenarios. This was actually asked by some of the stakeholders that participated in the consultation process. Can you tell us more about what information are needed for orbital safety? Can you tell us more what information are needed for avoiding dust interference? We didn't want the LIS 101 to become a 150 pages document, so we took that note and we decided to leave it for a second phase. So what we want to do in 2026 is to look at specific scenarios and do case studies with the participation of relevant stakeholders. And then we would like to conclude those case studies with a tabletop exercise to test the findings that we got in the case studies. And then on the side of that, we will be available to advise and monitor the implementation of the Lunar Information Sharing 101. So if a stakeholder needs any help, has any questions, we will be there to answer it. This is one of the actually exclusive perks of LPP, because we're exclusively dedicated to this policy development and implementation activities. We will be able to follow up across the life cycle of these documents and make sure that they are implemented and they are also evolved and adapted and respond to the needs of stakeholders. The stakeholders that we're targeting primarily are lunar operators, space agencies, and policymakers. Any actor that is going to actually share information about a lunar mission would certainly be our primary audience. But like always, we're open to hear and work with any actor that has something to contribute to the process. Opportunities, you can participate in the case studies and the tabletop exercises if you're one of the stakeholders. If you are interested in taking a lead and help us shape these case studies and exercises, you can partner with us if you have any resources you can provide in kind, or you can fund the development of these studies. And we are in conversation with a number of entities on how do we want to promote these case studies, including, of course, Open Lunar. So there is also the possibility of funding this so that we can work on them together. If you have no expertise, but you have resources, that is certainly most welcome. In terms of implementation itself, we are aiming so far to develop 1 or 2 case studies and then 1 or 2 tabletop exercises. And by the end of the year, we may issue an updated version of the Lunar Information Sharing 101, depending on what we're learned through the implementation process. We're going to be attending key events, especially, of course, the Popos cycle, any Artemis and ILRS gathering that could be benefiting from our presence. We'll certainly be willing to support it. And then selected events across the board, like ISC, Space Resources Week, and other events where it makes sense for us to bring these documents and help stakeholders with its implementation. In terms of timeline, we're looking to conduct the studies in Q1 and Q2, do the tabletop exercise in Q3, and then have this publicly released or released in different versions, depending on the partners and the funding, by the end of the year, so that then we can look back and see how the implementation has gone. If you're interested in joining this effort, any level of it, please do let us know. We're taking the next month and this one to receive interest, to talk with stakeholders, get any feedback and suggestions. And then we would like to work with any interested entity to tailor partnership agreements, funding agreements, participation schemes in October and December, so that by the end of the year, we can be ready to start working together in 2026. And if you're interested, of course, you can mention it today, or you can send us an email. You know where to find Sam and myself. We also have a dedicated email address to this. So with that, I will drop you a link here. It's very easy, lunarpolicyplatform.org/information sharing. That will bring you to our landing page for the LIS one-on-one and additional information on the document. So we encourage all of you to look at it, download it, and distribute it within your network and hopefully use it. And we hope this presentation was useful to you. We really would like to thank everybody who participated in the development of the Lunar Information Sharing 101, Open Lunar for funding it, and all of you for being with us at this historical moment, at least for LPP. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your attention and open it up for any question and discussion points. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Sam, I know you've been taking a look at questions, and I know Arfan is already raising his hand, and I find it always like difficult to stop him, so I don't know where do we want to start. Please, Sam, I'm in your hands.
Of course. Arfan, since you put your hand up first, I will give the floor to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, Antonino, thank you for a very comprehensive, detailed summary, and I'm glad to see some of the points that we had discussed and raised over the last year or so reflected there. And Sam, good to see you again, and colleagues on the call. I suppose my comment, and I think we've raised this in previous discussions, Antonino, you touched on it briefly, but crucially, this relationship and the developing relationship and the overlaps between Artemis Accords and the ILRS, and the role that we can play in sort of Space Lunar, but also particularly from a UN COPUOS perspective, to see there is the coherency and consistency in the approach. And then the slightly awkward second question is, how do you see this balance shifting now between government, national space agencies, and the private sector, and that move and that push? And what does that mean for the speed and development of that work and the regulatory environment that goes with that? Over to you, Antonino.
Thanks so much, Arfan. And as always, excellent questions. You're touching right on the most important points. I'm going to start with the Artemis and ILRS overlaps. I think obviously that's one element that has always been in our minds in the past few years since the 2 programs were announced. I have to say that I think COPUOS in this area is making important strides. The establishment of ATLAC, for example, the Action Team on Lunar Activities Consultation, which is now finally ready to begin its work, brilliantly led by our colleagues Hassan from Pakistan and Ulpia from Romania, I think will be a crucial place where those member states can come together in a comfortable environment for them and kind of find the common spots. Also, the working group on the 5 United Nations treaties within the legal subcommittee, which is discussing specifically information sharing, is another place where we can find commonalities between the two of them. And I can tell you, I've been attending both these groups meetings at COPUS, and so far I haven't seen any major divergency. In fact, if there is one thing that unites this program for sure, we know, is information sharing and the need to share information about what the others are doing to avoid overlaps and also to avoid conflict. The question is really which channel are you going to use and how are you going to do it? So that's where we think the template could hopefully be of help. And then the UN channel through Article 11 is a natural place, but then complementary databases like the Ledger can help as well. From our side at LPP, we've been working with both Artemis and LRS countries. And I cannot tell you more at this stage, but we have a project in the pipeline that would hopefully bring together these groups of countries to have a place for discussion exactly about this kind of issue. So anything that from the, let's say, civil society, non-governmental sector we can do to facilitate these discussions and provide advice, we are there. But I think we're in a good spot, at least on the information sharing bit. For the second question you have, the move to the private sector, that's a wonderful point because it came up so much during the conversation, right? And it still remains an open question. Do we need to share information about commercial missions? This is mostly a question from governments, right? Is it our responsibility to do so? I cannot speak, of course, of responsibilities of governments, but I can tell you it's much more helpful if there is information shared about them. And this is in the best interest of commercial actors as well. Again, here, we're not talking about confidential proprietary information on IP rights. We're talking about basic information on who is doing what, when, and where. This is what we're talking about at this stage. And for commercial actors, it's more difficult to engage in targeted information sharing. And because, of course, they are busy with their own mission. Although I have to say, most of the companies that have made it to the moon, they've been quite open. I'd like to commend companies like iSpace, for example. They've been doing press releases, press conferences to be very transparent about what went wrong, what could have been done better, what they wanted to do. The problem is that this information is dispersed. It's difficult to find it. If you don't tune to the press release or to the YouTube channel, you will simply miss it, right? Or you will need to go to the iSpace website, look for the page of the mission in particular, and then get that information. What we need to do is to bring it up to a central repository that everybody knows the information will be there. And so that's where, again, I would point to the both UN registry and Lunar Ledger/database. One final thing that I want to mention is when governments are sharing information about commercial activities, and for example, the United States, Luxembourg, and Japan, they have done it under Article 11. You can find their submissions. It's extremely important to add points of contacts because you don't want to start a ping pong where a government calls another government, which calls an operator, which calls another operator, that then calls back the government. We need to know if there is not something that is related to, for example, Article 9 of the Aerospace Treaty, major diplomatic consultations. Things sometimes can be sorted out on a technical operational level. So including points of contact is essential. And last but not least, before I finish, there is another element, which is streamlining information sharing requirement through licensing. This is a key aspect. So how do we collect the information from the private actors is obviously an important question. The private actors themselves have not opposed to sharing basic information. They just want to know how and when and how the information will be used. So if you imagine a licensing system that incorporates certain parts of information sharing, then you can use that information to make notifications at the UN, and everything flows naturally from the domestic regulatory process to the international level. That's at least how we're trying to promote it. That's what some governments are thinking to do as well. And I think it's the natural way, because to license an activity, you will need to know what is the activity going to do, when is it going to happen, where is it going to go. So this is all the information we need to avoid interference, to ensure sustainability, and so on and so forth. So once you structure it in an organized manner, then that could be simply transmitted. The company will know already where the information will end up. Everything is comfortable. And then if there is any need for more detailed, confidential, sensitive information, you go on bilaterally because you know who to contact. Thanks.
Appreciate it. I'll go do a question from Christophe, and then Gaia will come to you. So Christophe's question was, let me just bring this up. There we go. What would be a desirable strategy for LIS tools, such as repositories and ledgers, to be shared between leading stakeholders, such as Copulus, industry, NGOs, etc., and how to share and manage this? One for you, Antonino.
Thanks, Sam. Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, of course. So it was, what would be a desirable strategy for LIS tools, such as repositories and ledgers, to be shared between leading stakeholders, such as Copulus, industry, NGOs, etc., and how would we manage and share these?
Thank you. Thanks, Christoph, for the question, and thanks also for contributing to the development of the document. I think our strategy, as I mentioned before during the slides, is really to understand first and foremost the stakeholders that are interested in cooperating with us on this. So we're doing this distribution effort to identify those stakeholders, to understand if and how our tools can be helpful to them. It starts, of course, with the stakeholders that participated in the consultation, and then we're going to go beyond to those who could not make it but are still interested in the topic. And then LPP recently became, or at least was accepted by Copus to be a permanent observer. If the GA does not have any objection in October, we will be at Copus in our own standing. We will be submitting the document to Copus and hopefully have it there ready for any use that could be relevant for member states there. So I think the strategy for us is really to talk to each other and then have convening opportunities between stakeholders that have the same interests and then move forward to work together on that. We have about 4 months to get that done before the end of the year. So we hope to make the best possible use of that time.
Goyo, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Sam. And congratulations indeed, to you, Antonino, to LPP. So I'm honored, to be part of it, this work. So just some responses to the previous questions, also my personal thoughts. So the first one, I believe that the work of IPP actually sort of leading role there. As my personal observation, the state's conversation within Copulus just like behind of this research a lot. I'm afraid that in short term, it's hard for the delegations, to talk about the details as to information sharing, although there's less controversy matters in this case. You mentioned that the relevant platform to discuss, the first one, ATLAC. We shared the ideas before. The title actually is not coordination action team, it's just consultation action team. So for states, for delegations there, I believe that most of them, particularly the specifying countries, the leading countries, their concern is about the consultation during the application, or we say the implementation of the specific lunar project. So before that, such kind of, we say, theoretical discussion or legal discussion, I'm afraid is more relevant to the space resources working group on the legal subcommittee. But as you know, at this stage, they are just talking about some preliminary principles, information sharing, benefits sharing, part of it. But again, it's hard to come to the details in short term. And as to the Article 11, the working group, the template, I talked with Sam before, maybe for Francisca, she can consider to put a template about lunar activities specifically, but it's not the case now. So that's my personal observation as a first point. And second one, when talking about information sharing, my concern as space lawyer always is about the sharing of legal information, how to confirm the responsible state, the relevant jurisdiction and control over specific project, object, activity. It cannot be solved only by registration. So we know Article 2 of the Registration Convention, that's the reservation. It's possible for the states, to reach on like agreement about the attribution of the jurisdiction over the object or personnel, which can be different with the registry state. So for us, we are supposed to encourage delegations, to share such kind of we say internal agreements, because it's not like it's not supposed to open to all. And then actually a more detailed matter is about the right over the abstracted resources or samples, whether the states, the stakeholders would like to announce what kind of right they have, they would like to claim over such kind of resources. Such kind of information sharing also, I think, super important. It might be considered by you, by the team, in the next stage when considering the case studies, maybe a hypothetical case, something like that. And the last point as to the relation between states and private sectors, also I mentioned this part before. It's not supposed to be, how to say, share information internationally for the private sector. They are not obliged to do so, no matter it's about IP or other. It's a matter of a national regulatory framework. So the states just have the obligation, to put the details, such kind of requirements over the private sectors as to the information sharing. And at the international platform, again, states, or we say the intergovernmental organization, they are the subject to be obliged, to share information, including those related to private sectors. So that's my my point. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Guru. Thank you so much for your great comments and for being such an important part of the development of the Lunar Information Sharing 101. We're very pleased to cooperate with you. And, a few months next from now, we're going to see each other in China for the announcement, the inauguration conference of the Guaosple Alliance, to which we are a proud observer or partner. So thank you so much for us. Few things before I go to next question, maybe. Completely agree with you. The obligation is upon states. Private actors don't have an obligation internationally, but that's why I mentioned before, the licensing systems can help us into streamlining those obligations and making sure that we can collect the information we need from private actors, because there is a need to get that information out there, because most of the activities, at least in the Western world, are done by private actors. And so it's important that. I loved your point about sharing information, legal information on who is the responsible state, eventually licensing rights for the use of resources. Those are extremely important points. And I take your suggestion on a case study on resource rights. We will certainly take a look at that. If there is any interest, also, we could potentially work on it together, because you may remember from the Hague building blocks time that there needs to be an information sharing system for resource rights to become priority rights, quote unquote. And so information sharing is a key part of it. So certainly very happy to look more at that. So very much appreciate that. Thank you. And Sam, over to you.
Fantastic. Cheers. Marietta, good to see you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, indeed. All good.
Thank you so much. I just have a very brief question. According to me, Antonino, you know my questions, but very short, brief question. It's about the point on sustainability and cooperation. So you mentioned something that is quite interesting. So you mentioned that one of the motivations was also probably related to understanding the business as well, right? So a little bit of like the offer and demand. So I want to know, in that respect, what would be the kind of information that should be shared to understand the business? I don't want to use the words, but it's exactly what we're talking about. So just to understand the business, that should be probably just the general demands of the customers, or how many customers do we have per field, or yes, you know my question. So that's,
yeah,
but thank you very much. It was great, as always.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marietta, for being with us today, and also Royal Astronomical Society is another of our partners, and we're going to work together on a very exciting event towards the end of this year to talk about, science and ethics, but also information sharing. So stay tuned for more announcements on this towards the end of the month. So thank you also for being such a great partner to LPP.
And also collaboration with the Ledger. I just want to say that because I love that part.
As well.
That's my favorite.
As well. Absolutely. So in the sense of your question, sustainability and cooperation, I have to say, like, at first I was also surprised by this kind of comments that we got from private actors, in the sense of like information sharing could be in a way, used for selfish purposes for business development. But if you think about it, it does make sense, right? The development of a lunar economy is something that needs to be planned in advance. When you are investing millions or billions of dollars to develop infrastructure on the moon, you need to have a first understanding of who are your customers. And in fact, this remains the most unanswered question whenever I hear even discussions on space resources, right? Who is the customer? Who are we getting these resources for? What are they going to do with them? Right now, without a proper system on information sharing, without the availability of information about who is going to do what and where and why, then it's going to be difficult to make any of that. Those will be just guesses. So as a business, you will need to find your customers by having to look for them on your own. But if you could go into a place and say, okay, these are the next mission going to the moon in 15 years. These are the type of missions. I think, again, to answer your question, what do you need to know? I think to start a conversation, you need to know basic things. You need to know what the mission is, what kind of activity it will perform. Will it need energy, for example? One of our partners and friends is Volta Space Technology, right? A Canadian startup who is looking to do power beaming of energy from orbit to the surface. That company will look at who is going to do what on the lunar surface and how much energy will they need and where will they need it, so that we can have a satellite that will give them the energy wherever they need it and at the power they need it. So this is, I think, what is required for business. Understanding the type of activities, where they will happen, and when they will happen. So that will give you a time horizon, because, for example, an activity happening in a year may be too short for you to develop a technology or to get your technology to the moon. If you know that you have 5 years, if you know that there is 5 of this instead of only 1, you have a potential, range of customers. So that is, I think, the kind of information that would help business development on the moon through information sharing. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Can I just add
very briefly, telegraphically, because we need to bring it to a close.
Will that be available then to the general public, or that will be just available? I'm thinking about the ledger as well, right? So that will be available just with limited availability, just thinking about, the customer relationship with the, yes.
It's a good question. And we also asked that during the consultation. So I think this will need to go gradually. So there is a certain degree of information that you want to be able to access publicly and that you want everybody to see. Because again, if it's public, you can reach a potential infinite number of customers. If it's private, you only know that you're limiting yourself to the people that subscribe to a certain platform. So I would say like a broader type of information, maybe more high level, very generic, will be public. And that's where we have, for example, the registry that I mentioned before at the UN. Potentially the ledger may have public and private fields. This is something that I leave to the Open Lunar team to discuss in their own engagements, of course. But certainly more detailed information on how you're planning to do your business, that will never be public. It will only be shared one-to-one on in platform that have a certain protected access, because we're talking about then sensitive business information. But again, the very basic of it will be public, because nothing on the moon is a secret. Nothing on the moon will happen in secret. Even on the far side of the moon, we can have eyes. We're going to have soon relay satellite, despite, or in hopefully synergy with the conversation on radio astronomy. So there will be eyes everywhere. So to keep sort of secrecy, to me, it's just going to be very difficult to achieve. So maybe why don't just embrace the openness and use it to your advantage while keeping a good faith approach. Sweet. I'm very, very happy to continue this conversation. I think, Sam, I don't know if we have more questions, but perhaps we need to bring this to a close because we don't want to abuse anybody's time.
Yeah, we have some lengthy questions, but I think we'd better give that to a close and they can email us to find out those. So sounds good, mate.
Yes. Thanks so much for moderating this event and for being such a wonderful colleague. And all of you who we couldn't answer your question, please send them to us via email. You add our email address. Maybe, Sam, you can put it in the chat. You know us anyways, you can find us pretty easily. So we'll be certainly happy to talk more, answer your question. Like I said before, if you're interested in working together on implementation and distribution of the LIS 101, please do reach out to us. So towards the end of this event, I just would like to say a big thank you to all of you for being here towards this hour during the summer holidays. We saw a very good attendance, more than we expected. So thank you so much for that. The event will be published online, hopefully on our YouTube channel that will become public soon enough. So please stay tuned. We're also going to send you a link via email to all those of you who have registered. So you will have access to it, rewatch it. We're also happy to share the slides with you if you're interested. And of course, the document is now available. It's out in the open. let's use it and distribute it. And with that, thank you all so much. Thanks to Open Lunar again for supporting the development of this document, and thanks to our partners and collaborators for the work we're doing this year and for the much more impactful work we will do in the next ones. So thanks all very much.
Thanks very much, both.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.